The Western. It's one of the most iconic genres in film history, a cinematic landscape filled with rugged cowboys, noble sheriffs, and outlaws who live and die by the gun. And for decades, filmmakers like John Ford and Howard Hawks defined the Western with sweeping landscapes, good old-fashioned hospitality, and clear-cut morality. But over time, the genre evolved, becoming darker, more self-aware, and more subversive. So today, let's explore how the Western transformed from its initial golden age to the gritty revisionist stories of the modern era. In the 30s and 40s, directors like John Ford established the visual language of the Western. Films like Stagecoach and The Searchers weren't just stories about cowboys, they were myths about American identity. Monument Valley, John Ford's favourite backdrop, became synonymous with the Old West, presenting the frontier as vast, untamed, and full of opportunity. Ford's Westerns often followed a simple but powerful structure. The hero, typically played by John Wayne or James Stewart, stands for justice in a land of chaos. Good and evil are clearly defined, and the cowboy was a symbol of individualism and honour. But even within Ford's films, there were hints of complexity. The Searchers, for example, follows John Wayne's Ethan Edwards, a Civil War veteran who embarks on a years-long quest to find his kidnapped niece. While Ethan is portrayed as a strong, capable frontiersman, his deep-seated racism and obsessive vengeance makes him more of an anti-hero than a traditional cowboy hero. This moral complexity and ambiguity would later become a foundation for future westerns. But by the late 1960s, America had changed, and so had the Western. The Vietnam War, political scandals, and social upheaval made audiences less interested in the mythic heroes of Ford's films. Enter the Revisionist Western, where the heroes aren't always heroic, and the frontier wasn't so glorious. Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch shattered the illusion of noble gunfights. Instead of clean, choreographed duels, The Wild Bunch instead presented nothing but brutal and chaotic violence. The film's aging outlaws, led by William Holden's Pike Bishop, aren't fighting for justice. They're just trying to survive in a world that no longer has a place for them. Meanwhile, in Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood deconstructs the very persona that made him famous. His character, William Money, is a former outlaw now turned farmer who's pulled back into his old ways. But unlike the clearly drawn heroes of the classic westerns, Money's return to killing is slow, messy, and painful. The film seeks to strip away the glamour of the Old West, showing violence as ugly and morally complex. So while Hollywood was reassessing the Western, Italy gave it a whole new face entirely. Enter Sergio Leone and Sergio Corbucci, the directors who had redefined the genre with the spaghetti Western. In films like A Fistful of Dollars, Django, and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Leone and Corbucci took the classic American cowboy and turned him into something more morally ambiguous. Corbucci's Westerns are among the most violent of the genre at the time. The graphic gunfights, torture scenes, and extreme cruelty. His Westerns lack a sense of justice, and good does not always triumph. His protagonists are also often disfigured, mute, or morally compromised, unlike Sergio Leone's cool and composed anti-heroes. And while Sergio Leone likes to romanticize landscapes in the style of John Ford, Corbucci's settings are harsh and inhospitable, from snowy wastelands to muddy, desolate towns. His films also often reflect leftist and anti-fascist themes, portraying corrupt authorities, violent capitalists, and revolutionary struggles. Sergio Leone's Wild West is a lawless, corrupt world where survival is more important than honour. Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name isn't the noble lawman of John Ford's era. He's an opportunist, playing both sides to his advantage. Ennio Morricone's haunting, unconventional score and Leone's extreme close-ups add to the tension, creating a grittier, more intense take on the genre. Today, the Western continues to evolve, often blending with other genres to create subgenres. The Coen brothers' No Country for Old Men strips away the traditional Western's grand moral statements, instead presenting a world where chance and fate dictate survival. S. Craig Zahler's Bone Tomahawk blends the Western with horror, injecting the genre with brutal, almost nightmarish violence. The film takes the classic frontier rescue story and twists it into something far darker, showing how the untamed the wilderness can be just as terrifying as it is lawless. Additionally, Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained reclaims the Western narrative in the style of Sergio Corbucci, focusing on a black hero in a genre that has historically ignored or vilified black characters. Tarantino embraces the spaghetti Western's violence and anti-heroes, but updates it with modern themes of justice and revenge, and uses the antebellum South as a new setting. Meanwhile, Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog offers a psychological take on the Western, exploring masculinity and repression within the vast landscape of 1920s Montana, a time where the Wild West was starting to die. The film is a far cry from the straightforward cowboy stories of the past, proving that the Western is still fertile ground for new ideas. From John Ford's mythic heroes to Clint Eastwood's brutal revisionism, from Sergio Leone's anti-heroes to the psychological complexity of today's westerns, the genre has never stopped evolving. But at its core, the western has always been about one thing: change. The Wild West, whether physical or moral, is always shifting, and the characters who ride through it, whether noble gunslingers or tragic anti-heroes, must face that challenge head on. The western isn't dead, it's only just getting started.